These are our original minutes of the CIF. They go all the way back to 1913. Here is the infamous grenade throw. When I went in to talk to her, I wanted her to tell me who were the good old boys that wouldn't let them participate. The largest crowd to see a high school football game. From the heart, that was the greatest thing in the world, that his kids could see him run. And that was because of the history we had.
This is the history of the CIF Southern Section.
It was the spring of 1913 that high schools in Southern California first joined together to form an association.
The history of the CIF Southern Section dates back to 1913. And from meeting minutes to trophies, it's just about all accounted for.
These are our original minutes of the CIF. They go all the way back to 1913.
This is Dr. John Dahlem, known around the organization as Dr. D or Doc.
I was active in CIF. I was president. I retired, past president, all of that. And Rob sort of said, you know, we have some materials. Would you like to look at them? So they took me back to one of the rooms in the back of the office, and it was just packed full of stuff.
Doc has an exciting resume, including roles as a high school principal, wrestling coach, decorated veteran, and former president of the CIF Southern Section, amongst the many other hats he wears, like world traveler.
I am the official voluntary historian at CIF Southern Section.
There's not one person who knows more than he does about the history of this organization.
I did a pretty complete history of CIF and the changes in, the different decades that of CIF history has gone through, the trials and tribulations to CIF.
Track and field was the sport that started it all. March 29, 1913. This date marked the first organized high school track championship. The day was organized and managed by Seth Van Patten, and after a successful event, the Southern California Interscholastic Athletic Council came to fruition, later renamed the CIF Southern Section.
This was the original trophy handed out in 1913 when they started the CIF. And they started the CIF because everyone was complaining they have track meets and the coaches can play and run and all this ridiculous. Somebody walking down the street, they'd pull them in, they'd run for the school. And they all complained. And finally, Seth Van Patten said, well, if you don't like it, run your own track meet. And they ran their own track meet in 1913. And that was the start of CIF.
Seth Van Patten became the first commissioner of athletics. Following track, football, baseball, basketball, aquatics, and tennis were the first official sports of the CIF Southern Section. In 1913, there were 24 member schools. Today, there are 558, spanning across 8 counties.
The Southern Section is part of a statewide federation which encompasses 10 such sections. The CIF Southern Section is by far the largest, and it's recognized throughout the country as one of the most outstanding organizations of its kind.
During the early days, some of the most historic competitions and changes took place, making for quite a decorated history. Grenade throwing was an exhibition event at a Southern Section track meet on April 20th, 1919. You heard that right, grenade throwing.
Here is the infamous grenade throw.
This came after the council voted in favor of eliminating the javelin throw. The grenade throw came to be after college organizations got the idea circulating. World War I was coming to an end, and there remained a very patriotic fervor in the community. At the November 18th, 1918 CIF-SS Council meeting, the following motion was made and unanimously approved. Upon the motion, the throwing of the hand grenade shall be substituted for the javelin throw. They wanted the grenade throw to cover 3 tests for distance, accuracy, and how many throws could be accomplished throwing into a trench while dropping to the ground in between each throw.
They didn't throw a grenade like this, but they threw it. Everyone said that they throw it for distance, and people don't realize in World War I, the Americans were great with the grenades because they could throw a grenade like a baseball.
The first winner in that 1919 CIF event was Tyson from Huntington Park High School with 11 puts. Dating back to the 1800s lived the exciting-ish swimming event known as the plunge for distance. In this event, participants would dive into the water and float face down for 60 seconds without moving their bodies. In 1904, the event made it to the Summer Olympics, and on May 26, 1923, the plunge was an official Southern California interscholastic event in the swim championships held at Long Beach High School. The first champion was Butler from Los Angeles High School, and he plunged 68 feet, 11 and a half inches. After the 1932 Olympic Games were held in Los Angeles, there was a large rowing facility that became the home of high school rowing in Southern California for the next several years. There were a couple of shells that were purchased from various places and were used starting in spring of 1935 for the staging of the high school championship called the Long Beach Interscholastic Rowing Regatta. The schools that participated there also competed against high schools from the north in the California State Prep Rowing Championships. Alameda High School was the dominant force in rowing for many years, and they were coached by University of California rowing coach Kai Ebright. Following high school, many of the rowers went on to row for the top college teams in the nation. While grenade throwing, plunging, and rowing can really catch your attention, there were a variety of other unique sports and events that might be a surprise to you. Archery, bowling, boxing, checkers and chess, curling, cycling, equestrian, fencing, handball, horseshoes, ice hockey, karate, motocross, quoits, rifle, rodeo, roller hockey, sailing, softball for boys, speedball, squash, surfing, and skiing, snowboarding.
More than 40 schools compete in gymnastics, where body control and coordination go hand in hand.
When the Spanish influenza hit in 1918, an entire year of high school sports in the CIF Southern Section was impacted. As a result of the Spanish flu, the 1918 football championship game was delayed for an entire year. The game was eventually played on March 8, 1919, which was the latest day that a championship game has ever been played. The game was between Coronado and Fullerton High Schools and was played on the Fullerton field. Fullerton won the championship game with a score of 18-0 over Coronado. On October 25, 1944, Manzanar High School held the only interscholastic event on its premises. Manzanar is the site of one of 10 American internment camps, where more than 120,000 Japanese Americans were incarcerated during World War II from March 1942 to November 1945.
They couldn't leave. They were under guard. 1,000 students were in their high school. So it was one of the largest high schools in the state of California. And they had great little teams. They played each other, but nobody would play them. And finally, Big Pine, a school up a little bit north of them, said, hey, we'll come down and play you. They came on to the relocation camp. They played. The Japanese team won, but afterwards they congratulated each other. The guards were there. They had opened the gates. Big Pine drove out, and they closed the gates. A sad story was Camp Manzanar, yet Camp Manzanar High School is now in the CIF Southern Section.
In 2009, the CIF Southern Section Executive Committee voted unanimously to grant honorary membership to Manzanar High School. This honor was presented to the school by Commissioner James Staunton and Dr. John Dahlem.
Friday night is high school football night around the nation, and Southern California is no exception. In fact, in Southern California, interscholastic football is king.
The 1956 game of Downey High School versus Anaheim High School is what is referred to as the Dream Game. The game was played at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum on December 14. There were over 60,000 people in attendance at a game that ended in a tie. The rosters of the two teams held some of the best players at the time in Randy Meadows and Mickey Flynn. The star-studded game ended in a 13-13 tie, and both teams were happy to be named co-champions.
Recently, I had the opportunity to write this book with Dennis Bateman, who's a famous historian here in Orange County. He's written a lot of great books, and this is a book on Van Horbreck. And we researched Van all the way to his early days and everything, one of the most famous football coaches in the Southern Section. And he was the one that was in that particular game between Randy Meadows and Mickey Flynn.
It's not at all uncommon for Anaheim High School to average more than 10,000 fans for home games.
In 1957, high school prep football had one of its largest ever crowds, 85,931 people, and this is not including the over 5,000 fans that were turned away at the gate.
The largest crowd to see a high school football game. Second, one was almost 100,000 in Chicago, but in California, the largest crowd to ever see a football game was that following the Mickey Flynn Anaheim Downey game was the Shrine game.
The Shrine All-Star football game between North and South was held at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, which is where the USC Trojans currently play today. The game was not only a lights-out success for the North, with a win of 32-0 over the South, but also for the Shriners Crippled Children's Hospital, to which all of the proceeds from ticket sales were donated. The game featured two of the top players of the time in Mickey Flynn and Randy Meadows, who were named co-players of the year in the previous season from Anaheim and Downey high schools.
We have every copy of the Shrine football game, which was very, very important, of their programs. The old temple that ran that game doesn't even have those. The other thing that probably I'm proud of, these are all high school football programs. So I just pulled one out. Here are our first programs that I can find, and these 1925. That's an official program. Long Beach versus Pasadena, played in the Rose Bowl in 1925. The Rose Bowl opened in 1923. But the nice thing about these, as you start, you can see how old they are. These are programs, and then pretty soon they start to get into the nice programs. Here is an example of CIF Championship football program. And then as things went on, they started to get colored. Here is the Camp Manzanar. They actually put out a high school program. And these are all the high school football programs. And this whole area is high school football program. We're going to digitize these. So somebody that played for Long Beach Wilson, like Mr. Wigod did in 19 whatever, he can come in here, pull out one of these, or look on it on the computer and see the actual program.
Football and fans are just as enthusiastic in the small private schools where limited enrollment dictates that six-man football is the order of the day.
Modern-day high school football in Southern California is full of schools boasting elite national-level programs, no matter how big or small the student population of a school is. But in the early days of amateur high school sports, smaller schools turned to six-man football to give all schools the opportunity to play, no matter their size. It was 1938 when the first Southern California six-man football game was played. The game was between the Claremont High School junior class and the Claremont High School senior class. The first CIF Southern Section six-man championship game was in 1965 between Flint Ridge Preparatory School and Rio Hondo Prep. Flint Ridge Prep took the champion title with a score of 65-61. There are several unique differences in six-man football, and they include it's an 80-yard field by 40 yards wide, 15 yards to gain a first down, all six players are eligible to receive a pass, you must have three linemen on the line of scrimmage, the player who snaps the ball cannot run but can lateral, the field goal is worth 4 points, there's a mercy rule of 45 points or more at halftime, sometimes it's called the slaughter rule. In 1974, the Southern Section moved away from the six-man model and pivoted to the eight-man football model, as schools believed it was close enough to classic 11-man games to attract more students and athletes to their schools to gain more distinction. While the six-man championship only lasted for 8 seasons, its current impact can be seen on the modern game of football today. Its heavy use of aerial passing, fast-paced gameplay, and incredibly high scoring are just some of the ways this movement was one of the most influential in CIF football history. With so much development and growth happening in Southern Section sports, the CIF Executive Committee needed to find a way to supply schools, coaches, and officials a one-stop shop for rules and common questions. Cue the Blue Book. The Blue Book is home to the Constitution and bylaws of the Southern Section.
I was able to get some really old constitutions, and these explain all of our rules. And you can see now how big one of our rule books is.
It was first introduced all the way back in 1945. It was 44 pages and blue in color, of course. 5 copies were given to each school. Today, the Blue Book is 248 pages.
Now we're set to bring you something new to Channel 31 Sports, CIF coverage of the softball championships, the 4A division.
When the CIF Southern Section formed in 1913, it only governed boys' sports. Girls' sports were under the State Department of Physical Education. Rather than an organized season, the girls would typically have sports days, so there were still organized sports for high school girls, but not under the Southern Section office.
When CIF began, there was a lot of women sports going on in 1904, 1903 and all of that. But when CIF was created in 1913, women versus women interscholastic stopped because the men said it's dangerous, they can't run fast enough, it's bad for their organs, they can't be out at night, we don't want them to travel. And so basically women's sports interscholastically between schools stopped except for tennis.
Organizations like the Girls Athletic Association and the National Association for Girls and Women in Sports formed in 1920, just after the 19th Amendment passed the year prior, guaranteeing women's voting rights. Things didn't exactly start to pick up for the girls, though. It wasn't until 1950 the CIF Southern Section sponsored a girls' event. That first one was a tennis tournament. Following this, we began seeing women competing at events like the Olympics, Wimbledon, and U.S. Open Golf.
That's it.
In 1965, the CIF State Committee on Girls Sports reported that medical experts believed there was no negative impact upon females who play sports. In 1971, the Girls Interscholastic Advisory Board organized to control girls' sports in the CIF Southern Section. The first official CIF girls' sports were badminton, basketball, field hockey, gymnastics, softball, swimming, tennis, track, and volleyball. Title IX was passed by Congress in 1972, granting equal access to girls in athletics.
These are all CIF athletes that played in Title IX and became world famous, and this was used for the table decorations. We like to believe here one of the founders of Title IX. And Karen Hillier, assistant commissioner here, I went into her office and I interviewed her. When I went in to talk to her, I wanted her to tell me who were the good old boys that wouldn't let them participate. The old guy, like the women can't do it and it costs too much money and training rooms and all that. And she talked about that, and she was very specific about that, how unfair it was. But she says, don't forget the good old gals club. And a lot of people don't realize that one of the reasons that women's sports took such a long time is GAA, Girls Athletic Association, was more of a school intramural type of program. To move from intramural to interscholastic, where you go out and play. And Karen left me with, what we wanted to do is we wanted to more than play, we wanted to compete for championships.
It's the Division 1A girls basketball playoffs first round.
On the field now are the Fountain Valley Barons, the #1 seed, the winners of the Sunset League. As you take a look at the capacity crowd here at Mayfair Park, they have filled them around the stadium. This camera shot you are seeing is down the right field line. A beautiful evening for softball, and you can see this crowd is just jam-packed here at Mayfair Park.
By 1973, there were 200 CIF Southern Section schools participating in girls' sports. That same year, it was decided that girls can play on boys' teams when there is no girls' team in that sport offered by the school. Girls could participate on football, baseball, and wrestling teams. In 1974, Debbie Seward became the first girl to win a medal in diving in the boys' championship. Debbie placed third that year, and the following year, Jane Ward won the championship after topping all of the boys' scorers. Jane Ward was the first ever girl to win a boys' CIF title in 1975 and was one of the United States' top 10 divers as well. In 1974, the first formal CIF Southern Section playoffs were conducted in 9 sports for girls: badminton, basketball, field hockey, gymnastics, softball, swimming and diving, tennis, track and field, and volleyball. Some of the most recent additions to Southern Section girls sports, to name a few, include wrestling, cheer, beach volleyball, and flag football. Today, there are Southern Section girls sports played by over 5,000 teams. The Southern Section has been home to dozens of successful athletes. Some of the most notable include Jackie Robinson, Reggie Miller, Glenn Davis, Tiger Woods, Eric Winalda, Brian Goodell, Pete Sampras, Bud Hauser, Karch Karai, Tony Osvedo, Stefan Abbas, Jack McDowell, Russell White, Michael Norman, Cheryl Miller, Dina Drossen, Laura Baugh, Julie Foudy, Lisa Fernandez, Janet Evans, Marion Jones, Misty May, Maureen O'Toole, Lisa Leslie, Billie Jean King, and today we see athletes like Freddie Freeman, Tara Davis Woodall, Russell Westbrook, and Giancarlo Stanton. Aside from a championship title, making the All-CIF team has become a postseason favorite amongst the Southern Section athletes. Dating back to 1907, athletes would be named to the All-Star team by local sports writers. In 1936, the Helms Athletic Foundation began sponsoring the All-Southern California high school football team. This team was chosen by the California Board of Athletics along with local sports writers. Fun fact, Los Angeles Polytechnic tackle Tom Bradley, later the mayor of Los Angeles, was on that list.
And this is an example of a CIF certificate, All Southern California Track and Field, 1944, listing this beautiful emblem and listing the names and where the school. So we have some of these, not every one of them.
In 1990, the Amateur Athletic Foundation funded the awards. This was an organization created with funds generated by the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics. In 2008, the AAF changed their name to LA84 and remain as the current presenters of the All-CIF Southern Section teams.
And I've had probably 10 people come back, and they've been at funerals, and they say, by the way, he was All-CIF, could you research this? And we've been able to find these originals, and they've displayed them at funerals.
Today, the All-CIF Southern Section teams are chosen by sport associations and local advisory groups from each team sport. Those groups relay the chosen teams to the Southern Section office, and the office releases the teams to the press. Office staff prints the certificates and sends them to the schools with financial support from the LA84 Foundation. While a carousel of companies had hands on All-CIF, other businesses slowly started supporting the organization with other matters. The earliest reference to any form of financial support was from FB Silverwood Clothing Store. They sponsored the 1915 CIF Southern Section Track and Field Championships with their logo on the program cover. Other companies began advertising in various Southern Section publications, but the executive committee ultimately felt they couldn't allow themselves to have sponsorships because it was considered professionalism and commercialization.
People didn't want to move to corporate sponsorships, and there was a big fight about that, and we don't want to sell ourselves out was the term they used then.
In 1978, Commissioner Thomas Burns took that idea and negotiated a contract worth $30,000 with Bob Engel and Charlie Seaver from Dr. Pepper. This funding helped offset the costs of certificates and championship trophies and patches. Charlie Seaver would supply Dr. Pepper for press conference luncheons, championships, and symposium, giving him the name of Mr. Dr. Pepper. This started the blooming development of corporate sponsorships.
And it's all about supporting the student athletes. The amount of money that was spent on just patches and medals, which nobody pays for at the school, T-shirts, the venues that we use, the people who work in the venues from this office, tremendous change, and they do a wonderful job.
Today, the CIF Southern Section has corporate partners as diverse as the Southern California Ford Dealers Association, Raising Cane's, U.S. Marines, just to name a few. Along with those sponsors, Paul Helms loved sports and was in the process of establishing the Helms Athletic Foundation. They provided a free office space from 1949 to 1959. This was the first time the CIF Southern Section had a designated office space. It was stated in the December 1949 bulletin that, "We have not asked why Mr. Helms invited us to occupy office space in this fine building. We think he knows this will all lead to better, finer, and cleaner athletics." This move allowed the CIF Southern Section to grow operations eventually leading to the need for a larger office. The next stop was an eye-catching new building in Culver City. Then, a stop on the campus of Garr High School. And finally, an old post office in Los Alamitos, which is where the CIF Southern Section still calls home.
This is an example of historical collections over a period of time, which include medals, some old shoes, things on that famous football game between Anaheim and Downey, and then Mr. Davis here, who played, of course, at Bonita High School in patches and whatnot. But I have collections of our medals all the way down to the original medals that we used in 1913. This is the trophy that was presented to the CIF champions, and probably the most famous with this trophy being held is Pat Hayden and McKay. This was the old trophy that was presented by the local newspapers, and there was tremendous coverage in high school sports by the old newspaper guys. And this is the trophy for that. And this goes all the way back into the 20s, and you can see 1923 where they're presenting this trophy. And it's sort of neat to see this trophy, and then here it is again. This trophy was in a trash can. Bruce McIntosh jumped into the trash can, pulled his trophy out, and on the side you'll see names like Jackie Robinson, and his name is on here. And then other collections, real quickly, that we have. Bill Pritchard wrote a complete history of water polo. He did this on his own. This is a complete history of water polo in the CIF Southern Section. Scott Schroeder is giving us all of these books. This is a compilation of football from 1912 to 1984. Rick Orbrand is an individual who, if you called him up and asked him about an individual, he would know about him. And I called him up and I said, could you quickly, and I was joking, tell me how many CIF Southern Section athletes have participated in the Olympics? 2 days later, he gave me a list of over 400 people. That was Rick Orban. He just passed away. Great gentleman. And the guy that probably is the root of much is Bruce McIntosh. Bruce was a collector. You would go to his home and you could barely get into his home. I took my wife there. She didn't even have a chair to sit down. Bruce McIntosh was the old type. He would go into the newspaper and write down every single score. Bruce McIntosh, and people don't believe this, had a record in those old things that were in the library that you pull out the library thing and little 3x5 cards. Every single high school in California, their football record score for every game in the state of California. Bruce McIntosh, and just an amazing guy. There were some films that they used to circulate in CIF, and they would list them in the bulletin. Do you want to see the 1948 CIF championship game between such a... And they would hand them out to the schools, and the schools would see them. Over a period of years, you can figure out what happened to those films. They were lost. I get a call from LA 84, and they say, we even have some films. Would you like to come up into this room? But you got to be careful. It opened the door. If you've ever smelled film, 16 millimeter, that had been around too long, you about die of asphyxiation. And they go, you can have these. So Tom and I carried these boxes out like that, brought them back here, and started to reprocess some of those films. And those are some of the earliest films we have.
And now the North tries a pass from Jacobs to Sam Brown, who gets it. There he goes down the sidelines, a very shifty runner, hard hitter, swings out to his right, eludes one tackler, swings back again, breaks away from another.
I got a call from someone that said, do you have old films? And I said, well, we have some that we've been able to get. He said, well, do you have 1966 or something, some track meet, some sectional meet? And I said, I think so. I said, yes, I do. I'll be happy to send you a copy. He says, you do not know how much this means to me. That's all he said. You do not know how much this means to me. And I sent it off to him. It didn't charge him anything. About 2 months later, he calls me, and he's crying. And he said, I ran in track. I was a very good track person, as you could see from the film. I said, yes, you ran an excellent mile. He says, I'm in a wheelchair now. I can't move. And my kids never saw me run. And to him, that was from the heart. I'm going to get emotional talking about from the heart. That was the greatest thing in the world, that his kids could see him run. And that was because of the history we had.
Ken Fagans, former All-Pacific Coast basketball star, noted sports official, and school administrator, has served since 1954 as Commissioner of Athletics for the CIF Southern Section.
The Southern Section office has been led by 10 different commissioners of athletics. Their leadership and implementation of new ideologies has developed the organization into the iconic entity it is today. This all started with Seth Van Patten, the father and czar of the CIF Southern Section. He was commissioner from 1930 through 1950. He helped organize and plan track meets and championships by wresting control away from the local colleges and YMCA. He helped found the CIF Athletic Association, eventually CIF Southern Section, during the Southern California Track Championship and became the Southern Section Secretary in 1928, eventually the first full-time commissioner in 1930 upon his teaching retirement. Next, William Bill Russell. He was commissioner from 1950 to 1954. During his time as commissioner, he worked closely with private schools to keep them in athletic eligibility, as public schools had a very tense and suspect view of private Catholic schools. He was also known for getting the women of member schools involved by encouraging them to decide how they wanted to integrate women's sports into the mix. He did this by creating women's committees to decide competition rules and laws. Despite pushback from many schools, Russell worked closely with the Civil Rights Office to help establish Title IX and went after those schools who were not abiding by said legislation. Next, J. Kenneth Tanglefoot Fagans. He was commissioner from 1954 through 1975. Under his leadership, a no-nonsense, punctual, and self-described workaholic, the CIF Southern Section grew exponentially during his time. School membership doubled from 218 to 458. He also did all of the office accounting during his time and increased Southern Section assets from war bonds from the 1930s. He was self-nicknamed Mr. CIF. Thomas E. Burns was commissioner from 1975 to 1980. He helped expand the secretaries and staff around him to help create a better structure, increasing the reach of the section, especially in women's sports. He also established the first CIF Southern Section sponsorships, which were Dr. Pepper and Wilson Tennis. In addition, he worked very hard with local legislators to keep CIF a separate entity, not under the country or the state or federal government. Ray Plutko was commissioner from 1980 through 1986. Prior to becoming a commissioner, he started with the Southern Section in 1975 as an administrative assistant and helped reorganize the football playoffs into the regional format we have today. He's also affectionately known as Chief Bracketologist for helping CIF seating committees. Stan Thomas was commissioner from 1986 to 1993. His accomplishments include creating the GPA athletic requirement, establishing school fees, and authorizing coaching and trainer certifications. Dean Crowley was commissioner from 1994 through 1999. He was known for wanting to adopt a very team-oriented workflow between the Southern Section office and member schools to help problem solve. Crowley had to overcome an incredible number of problems facing the organization when he came into the position, including a huge budget deficit, major standing litigation, open enrollment, and public versus private school classification issues. By increasing corporate sponsorship, strategic planning, and sportsmanship, Crowley turned the Southern Section around not just financially and bureaucratically, but in reputation as well. Jim Staunton was commissioner from 1999 through 2011. He worked to increase expansion of many sports, such as golf, and increase women's sports programs within member schools. He helped develop the 16 principles of pursuing victory with honor. Deeply concerned with increasing sportsmanship, he emphasized policies in equitable competition, started the Ethics in Sports Committee, and Champions for Character yearly awards, now named after him post-retirement. Staunton also increased sponsorships by 400%, starting the first television rights fees program. Rob Wigod was commissioner from 2011 through 2023. He implemented social media for the first time in the organization's history, allowing the organization to expand their reach throughout all stakeholders. Also brought on the CIF-SS home system, which greatly expanded the ability of the Southern Section office and member schools to communicate and take care of all processes electronically. Was instrumental in revising policies, handbooks, and business procedures that helped modernize the CIF Southern Section and increased partnerships with the other CIF and state offices. Also created the current system of competitive equity playoffs that is now used across the state. The Southern Section is now led by current Commissioner Mike West. He continues to lead the organization going forward and building upon the over 100 years of success from previous years. Today, the CIF Southern Section has 558 member schools. They are formed in 88 leagues, the largest league being the Moore League. There are 37 sports, 145 school districts, and approximately 275,069 athletes participating in athletic programs in the CIF Southern Section. There are 220 cities with 61,244 square miles of coverage. The largest private school is Mater Dei. The largest public school is Paramount. The smallest private school, Orion Academy. And the smallest public school is Sage Oak Charter.
When I was the president, I think our largest school was 4,800. Our smallest school was 15. And that was Lee Vining High School. And people don't understand that Lee Vining is no longer a CIF Southern Section school, but is past San Francisco on the inland side. And then we have Avalon High School, the only school that has an unfair advantage because you got to take a boat to go there and you're liable to get seasick.
There are 201 different mascots, and there are unique ones, which include the Breakers of Laguna Beach, the Burros of Burroughs Ridgecrest, Buster the Bulldog from Portola, the Flashes of Fillmore, and the two most unique nicknames, number one are the Earwigs of Dunn School, and number two, the Spuds of Ojai Valley.
There is no doubt that the CIF and athletics in general have become an important facet of the entire education experience.
Watch as Centennial has done it!
How about 15 in a row for Brian Keller? How about 7-1 as a record? And the Rams embrace. They are the champions of the 5A division.
The Lions stay undefeated in an epic ball game.
Law, perfect pass. Akers on the step around. Another chance for Redondo. Dykstra is stuffed, and the championship goes to Miracosta.
It doesn't matter the year. The Southern Section Championship always showcases the future stars of college in the NFL.
A service ace, and Marina takes the state championship in.
The CIF leading high school athletics into the new millennium.
The CIF Southern Section has been in existence for 112 years. Throughout this period of time, this outstanding organization has been known for its level of competition, its service to student athletes, and the excellence that stands for our member schools in the Southern Section. We look forward to the next 112 years and more, continuing to serve all who love high school athletics.
My hope for CIF is we've got to remember the Jimmies and Joes, the people who are out in athletics, like myself when I played. I was never going to be a professional, never had that aspiration, but I loved high school sports. And that we want to provide them with the ability to play and not worry about NILs and not worry about the professionalism. And that's a balance that we have to take forward. We have our schools that are sending a lot of kids to college and playing in the pros. That's great, but we've got to remember that there are a lot of kids out there, like those young men in the School of the Deaf who just won the CIF title or 8-man football or our 14th division football, whatever it is. They're playing. And you go to a game and they will tell you the rest of their life that the greatest thing was high school sports. And I used to say as a principal, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And so much of that is what I hope CIF continues to do.
This expansive knowledge on the history of the CIF Southern Section wouldn't be anything near what it was had it not been for Dr. John Dahlem. Here's to you, Doc.